Hello all you Krogan-loving cosmonauts, as always I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be talking about Mass Effect Andromeda a little bit more in a video that I've titled What Mass Effect Andromeda Did Right, and we're going to be talking about the things that I thought that the game did well, how that will affect the future of the franchise, because in my review, those of you who watch my review will know that there are many positives and many negatives to the game. This video in no way negates those negatives, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about things that I couldn't talk about in my review, including spoilers, story content, and that kind of thing. So it gave me an excuse to do an extra video on the subject. So let's get right into it. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was that I really loved the characters of Mass Effect Andromeda, more so probably than Mass Effect 3 and Mass Effect 1 combined. I felt that a lot of the characters that were inherent to the story in Mass Effect Andromeda were really fleshed out. They were well executed, the voice actors were good for those characters, especially the ones that I really did like, and I thought that overall there was a nice composition of different characters. In particular, some notable ones, I thought that Drax as the Krogan character was really a nice breakaway from what had come previous. Of course, you had Grunt, which was a nice change from Rex, but Grunt was young and a headstrong Krogan. Rex was a little bit older, but he was still in his prime, and I have to say that Rex still remains one of my favourite Mass Effect characters of all times, but I have to say that Drax really stole the show for me in many ways. I loved the idea of this, ancient Krogan who had survived the Krogan rebellions, who had multiple, implants and prosthetics, like half of his body doesn't exist anymore, and he is a really well-developed, experienced character. He's he's an old man that, is still Krogan at the core, still loves a good fight, still has everything that makes a Krogan, but also is a voice of wisdom. He cares a lot about the other characters. He looks after Kesh, which is his granddaughter, which is his sole reason for living. And I thought that his character in particular was really stand out. I thought that his execution, his lines, his voice acting, and of course the missions and loyalty missions that were embedded with Drax, I thought that they were really, really solid. My other standout would be Giles, who was the Angaran character who was able to join your crew, and I thought that the developers did a really good job with the Angaran race altogether. I thought they were a really unique race, something that we haven't really seen before in the Mass Effect universe. I thought they were unique, they were fun, they were exciting, they were vibrant. I loved the actual design of them, their physical appearance, as well as the traits that make Angaras Angaran, and I thought that Giles was a great thing of that, because you have this resistance fighter who not only is experienced and has really interesting foresight and input into every single mission, and he's probably one of the integral characters of the whole game. If you take Giles to every planet, there will be something for Giles to do and input that he can provide. But you have this character who's this strong resistance fighter, but he also acts like a child at some time. He also is very self-doubting, inexperienced, and almost vulnerable at stages, and I thought that his complex character worked well, and I thought the execution of Giles overall was very well done. And that goes for the majority of the characters on the crew, and not only just on the crew of the Tempest itself, but in the world that you get to meet. I thought that there's a subcast of characters within the game that work very well. Not all of them, mind you. I thought some of them were pretty jarring or bad. There's a couple that I really disliked on a personal level, but from an objective standpoint worked for the overall narrative. But for the most part, I have to say that the cast of characters in Mass Effect Andromeda, they really did nail it down very well. There's a nice variety in there. There is characters in there that have a lot of depth to them, and I felt that in terms of that experience, those talking and the interactions with your crew and the subcast, I thought that they really did that right. The next thing that I really liked about Mass Effect Andromeda, and that I thought they executed well, was the level design and world building itself. Each of the planets that you get to visit has a nice distinction. I thought the level design worked really well. It was big open spaces. There were some areas where I thought they could have done better, but I thought overall there was a nice level design to the fact that the worlds felt lived in. They felt like they had history. There was things to learn about each of these worlds. And while I would have liked more worlds to explore, because you didn't really get to explore all that many in terms of the actual length of the game. I thought what was there, they were jam-packed with content. There was multiple things to explore and see, and I thought that really worked in the game's favour. Coupled with both level design, world building, and the characters is, of course, the questing. And I thought that for the most part, Mass Effect Andromeda really did nail down the questing in probably a better way than I have seen in a long time, especially better than the way Dragon Age Inquisition did it. I often found myself really working against why I was there in Dragon Age Inquisition. I mean, you were head of the Inquisition, you were trying to do all these things, and then you had stupid quests that made no sense. Whereas I found that the questing system in Mass Effect Andromeda directly related to why you are there, which is, of course, to do something, to explore, to gather, make the worlds more viable, to, help the populace in some way. And I found that the questing system in Andromeda worked very well. It was well executed. The loyalty missions were probably the standout for me, bar the main story. I thought that the loyalty missions are probably some of the best missions that you'll get to play in the game for the characters, and I thought that they had really good, strong narrative moments in there. The side quests, for the most part, worked very well. There's a number of side quests that are very enjoyable and really help build that sense of the universe and the world that you are, and really do help with immersion. I wasn't all that impressed with some of the tasks that you're given, which are the, I suppose, side objectives, and although those were fetch questy types, go around, scan this plant, and while it does relate to the fact that you are in a completely alien galaxy and you have to document these things, I felt that it was a little bit of an artificial way to extend the time. Now, what I want to move on with, of course, the big one, which is the main story. This is something that, for me, had to be critical, it had to be all-important, and ultimately they had to nail it right for the Mass Effect franchise as a whole to basically live after this point. Now, don't get me wrong, the main story is not the thing that is going to blow you out of the water in any sense of the imagination, but it is good nonetheless. I have to say that I always thought that Mass Effect Andromeda had to basically blow me out of the water from the get-go, for me to enjoy it in any kind of way, especially after the debacle that was Mass Effect 3. However, I have to say that after playing the story, I really enjoyed the main story. I thought that the Ket as an enemy they were really interesting. There was an interesting backstory to them with the infighting, with their galactic empire, and with the Archon kind of basically deviating from why they are there to obsess over these Remnant and basically take over the cluster. I liked the fact that there were, overtones of various different themes. So you had the Ket, who had basically all but occupied the Angara, and the Angara were resistance, and so you're dealing with wartime occupation there. There's also the ongoing theme of Sam and Ryder, and they're both interlinked, an AI that's basically connected more so than it should be to a human, and that symbiotic relationship, which of course was basically explored somewhat in Mass Effect 3 with the AI theme, and should AI exist, should it not exist, what kind of limitations should it have, are they people? And I enjoy always exploring those AI themes. There were multiple themes in the main story itself that worked very well. I thought that as a main story, I thought it was a little bit short. To be honest, the majority of the content in terms of its longevity of Andromeda comes from the loyalty missions, comes from the side quests, comes from this idea that you are trying to make this cluster viable for life. But I thought that as an experience itself, just focusing on the main story, that it was an enjoyable one. I wasn't particularly impressed with the end boss fight. I thought that was a little bit rushed, but I thought that the overall narrative of the story worked very well. It was interesting, and it was a decent start, and that's the main point I want to make. It's a decent start, and that's what this is. It is a start. It is the start of a new storyline. It is the start of a new Mass Effect franchise, in essence, and I think that the overall narrative did enough to warrant a new second game. I'm excited to see what Andromeda brings. There are many criticisms and many suggestions I would have, but I have to say there are so many questions that still need answering just from this first game alone. For example, who was the mysterious benefactor involved in the Andromeda initiative? Because for those of you who don't know or didn't explore that storyline, basically Gene Garson comes up with the idea of the Andromeda Initiative. Let's go explore another galaxy. People are like, you're crazy, bitch. What are you talking about? We don't have the money for that. And then, of course, Shepard discovers the Reaper threat, to which then a mysterious benefactor who no one in the initiative knows about comes in and basically funds the entire project and is on board one of the arcs when they get there. Then, when Gene Garson arrives with the Nexus ahead of all the arcs, she is murdered, and it is then blamed on the Scourge, which is not true. And then the mysterious benefactor disappears, and so you don't get to find out who murdered Gene Garson and what happened there, although I have a sneaky feeling that it is probably the leader of Cerberus from Mass Effect 2, but that's just my opinion. In other sentences, you also have, the pending Ket invasion, because of course the Ket were there to, basically take over that part of the Andromeda galaxy. The Ket were there to dominate the Angara and steal their genes and incorporate them into their empire, because the Ket are a galactic empire. The Archon deviated from that. He was, obsessed with Remnant, and now he's dead. You have the Primus still alive, who walks off at the end of the game and probably is going to now lead the next Ket invasion into the Helios cluster. So there is that unanswered question about what's going to happen next. And there are multiple things, like the Quarian arc, for example. The Quarians had all the other races from the Milky Way, and their arc was thought lost or destroyed. And then at the end of the game, you find out that they are actually sending out a message to everybody else that they are alive, but they need to stay away, because they are basically warning people to stay away from whatever they found. And they contain all those other races. So there's multiple things going on at the end of the game that are going to obviously precede a second installment. So as a narrative baseline, I think that there's definitely potential for a really interesting series here. I think that Mass Effect Andromeda did enough to save the franchise from a complete and utter disaster. It didn't do itself any favors with all the inherent problems that it did have. However, I think that as potential goes, it will be interesting to see what happens next. I am certainly all for another game, that's for sure, and I really hope that they basically fix all of the problems from the first game. I would like to see the second game not be about Ryder, or if it is about Ryder, not have so many stupid lines in there. But for the most part, I'm certainly excited to see what else the Andromeda Galaxy has to offer, especially new races, because I just felt that there wasn't enough new alien races within this game. But overall, I feel that Mass Effect Andromeda did enough right to at least warrant a second try at the new franchise, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that. I would love to see if you think that there's enough potential within Mass Effect Andromeda to basically tell more stories in the Mass Effect universe, because that's what's most important to me. I love the franchise. I hate some of the games, and I hate some of the mechanics and the problems that are inherent with those games, but as a universe, as a world, I absolutely adore Mass Effect, and I do not want to see it go away. But I think that you can't deny, there's a certain point where no matter how much you love a franchise, you have to call it out for its bullshit, and that's certainly what happened with Andromeda in terms of the negative mixed reviews. But I hope that they are given the chance to bring us a new game and really put the time and effort into it, and of course most importantly the execution and the polish part, to really deliver on the second title and have something that really everybody universally enjoys and is critically acclaimed. So let me know what your thoughts are on the video and of course the subject matter. Like the video, share it if you wish, make sure to subscribe, and as always, I will see you next time.